I never thought a simple phone call could change the way I felt about everything. My life, at 36, had settled into a numbing kind of rhythm. Mornings spent buried under a mountain of files at the bank where I worked, evenings curled up on the couch with a half-read novel and a mug of tea cooling too quickly by my side. Friends had slipped away over the years, drawn into the orbits of their marriages, their children, their bustling family lives. Meanwhile, I existed in the quiet margins, where loneliness wasn't a sharp pain but rather a dull, persistent hum I had grown accustomed to. Love. I had almost forgotten what that word truly meant. There hadn't been anyone serious for years. I told myself it was by choice, that the chaos of relationships didn't fit my neat, predictable life. That was easier than admitting I was afraid of starting over, afraid of getting hurt again. When my older sister called that bright Thursday morning, her voice bubbling with excitement, I nearly let it go to voicemail. But something, maybe boredom, maybe a flicker of hope, made me answer. "We're planning a little picnic in the woods this Saturday," she said. "You have to come, Claire. The weather's going to be gorgeous. It'll do you good to get out of that bank air." I hesitated, turning the idea over in my mind. A picnic? In the woods? It sounded like the kind of spontaneous, lively thing other people did. Not me. Still, something inside me stirred. "All right," I heard myself say. "I'll be there." And so, Saturday morning found me driving out of the city. The windows of my car rolled down to let in the spring air, thick with the scent of blooming wildflowers. The world felt newly awake, alive in a way that made my heart ache with something I couldn't name. When I pulled into the small gravel clearing at the edge of the forest, I spotted them immediately. My sister, bustling about setting up a large checkered blanket and baskets of food, and, standing a little apart, a tall, broad-shouldered young man I barely recognized at first. Evan. My nephew. We hadn't seen each other in almost a year. The last time, he had been 17, lanky and all sharp edges and awkwardness. Now, at 18, he looked different. His body had filled out, strong and athletic, his hair a little longer, tousled by the breeze. He stood with a casual confidence that made something inside me falter. When he turned and caught sight of me, his face lit up in a way that made the world seem just a little less heavy. "Aunt Claire," he called out, his voice deeper than I remembered. I smiled, a little too brightly, and waved as I climbed out of the car. As I approached, he closed the distance between us in a few long strides, wrapping me in a hug that lifted me slightly off the ground. For a moment, I froze, caught off guard by the sheer strength of him, by the way he smelled, clean, like soap and fresh air, and something distinctly, maddeningly masculine. When he set me down, I laughed, a little breathless. "Evan, you've grown so much." He grinned, his teeth flashing white. "It's been a year, Auntie. Guess I had some catching up to do." I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, suddenly self-conscious. Was he always this tall? This handsome? I scolded myself silently. He was family. My sister's son. A kid. And yet, there was something in the way his gaze lingered on me. Something warm and electric that made my heart stumble awkwardly against my ribs. The picnic unfolded lazily under the sun. We sprawled across the blanket, laughing, eating sandwiches and strawberries so sweet they stained our fingers red. My sister chatted animatedly, catching me up on all the family news, most of which blurred into the background as I kept stealing glances at Evan out of the corner of my eye. He caught me once, his lips quirking into a knowing smile that made my cheeks burn. As the afternoon wore on and the sun began to tilt lazily toward the west, the others wandered off for a short hike, leaving Evan and me alone at the campsite. For a while, we just sat there in silence, the gentle rustle of the trees and the distant chirp of birds filling the space between us. "You look different," Evan said suddenly, his voice low, almost hesitant. I laughed lightly, trying to brush off the strange heaviness in the air. "Getting old, you mean?" He shook his head slowly, his eyes steady on mine. "No. Beautiful." The word hung between us, heavier than anything I could have prepared for. I looked away quickly, feeling the heat rising in my cheeks. This was madness. It had to be the sunshine, the unaccustomed freedom of the day, the giddy air of spring that made everything feel sharper, more alive. "You've grown up a lot too," I said, my voice too bright. "You're practically a man now." "Maybe," he said, his tone unreadable. "But some things don't change." I risked a glance at him and found his eyes still on me, steady, warm, intense in a way that made my stomach flip. It had been ages since I'd felt this rising hum just beneath the surface of my skin. A feeling I'd buried long ago, now clawing its way back up. Longing. I turned my gaze, pretending to rearrange the food wrappers and empty cups. Still, I could sense him, the nearness of him, the quiet steadiness in the way he looked at me without flinching. The forest seemed to hush around us, like it, too, was holding its breath. It felt as if time had slowed, the two of us surrounded by trees and filtered sunlight, shadows playing across our hands like whispered possibilities I didn't dare speak aloud. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't just my imagination running wild. As golden light stretched thin across the mossy ground and twilight began to settle in layers, nature's sounds shifted, birds switching places with insects, the air cooler now, and filled with the soft thrum of approaching dusk. I waved a hand in the air, irritated by a whining mosquito that buzzed too close. Evan let out a warm chuckle that danced over my skin like a breeze. "The bugs are winning," he joked, scratching at his arm. "You're gonna be their feast tonight." "I already feel like I am," I grumbled, swatting at another one. "Your bright ideas turning me into a buffet." Unbothered, he grinned. Then he tilted his head toward the tent we'd set up earlier. "How about a tactical retreat?" I raised an eyebrow. "To the tent." "Escape mission," he said, his grin deepening. "And maybe, while we're hiding from our tiny attackers, we could play a game." "A game?" I echoed, eyeing him suspiciously. He shrugged like it was the most casual thing in the world. "Cards. But not just any kind. Let's make it more interesting. Each round, winner gets a favor. Something fun." The words settled between us, their playful tone edged with something that made my breath hitch slightly. I hesitated, weighing the familiar against the unfamiliar pull in my chest. Evan watched me closely, his smile calm, like he was giving me space to choose. Not pushing, just waiting. And then something within me, some part that had long been quiet, gave a little nudge forward. "All right," I said, forcing a grin. "Let's do it." He lit up, practically bounding to his feet before extending his hand. I stared at it for a second, the easy grip, the solid warmth of it, and then placed mine in his. The moment our hands met, a jolt of warmth shot through me. He helped me up, and without another word, we slipped into the tent, laughter trailing behind us like a secret. Inside, the world dimmed. The outside noises softened. It was just the two of us now, surrounded by canvas, our knees brushing as we sat cross-legged on sleeping bags. Evan pulled out a worn deck of cards and gave it a practice shuffle. "Hope you're ready," he said with a wink. I play to win. I smirked, though my pulse was skittering. "Let's see who's got the luck tonight." He dealt the cards and we both drew. I flipped a 6, he revealed a queen. He hooped, tossing his head back. "First wish is mine." I rolled my eyes, arms folded. "Let's hear it." He paused, eyes gleaming with a curious light. "Tell me the biggest thing you haven't told anyone in a long time." I blinked. That was not what I expected. My laugh came too quickly. "What kind of wish is that?" "A real one," he said, voice softer, more sincere. "You owe me." And in that second, the tent felt smaller, quieter, as if his words had drawn a line in the air between joke and truth. For the first time in what felt like forever, something deep within me began to stir, a spark I thought had long gone out. Longing. I opened my mouth, searching for the right words, and came up empty. How could I possibly explain that seeing him again had jolted something loose inside me? That his voice, his laughter, even the way he looked at me, It filled spaces I didn't realize had been so painfully quiet that for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Instead, I settled on something easier. All right, I said, forcing a faint smile. Biggest secret? I kind of hate my job at the bank. I dream about running away to some quiet seaside town and starting over. It wasn't false, but it wasn't what he had really asked either. Still, it was enough to let the moment drift on. He gave a small nod, the corner of his mouth tugging upward. Noted, he said, handing over the deck. Your turn to shuffle. We played on, round after round, and the light between us softened. Each laugh felt warmer, each card draw a little more intimate. Our knees kept brushing, at first by accident, then neither of us bothered to move. Whatever was growing in the space between us, it wasn't silent anymore. Inside the canvas walls, the forest faded into a gentle hush. All that remained was this pocket of stillness, where the air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. I passed him the deck, fingers brushing, his warmth lingering on my skin. Your deal. He leaned in, the line of his shoulder skimming mine, his breath easy, the scent of sun and earth weaving into every corner of the tent. We drew cards again. Mine Jack. His ace. His grin was slow, almost thoughtful. Guess I'm on a roll. I tried to match his lightness, though my pulse was a drumbeat. All right then. What'll it be this time, champ? He seemed to hesitate, his gaze softening in a way that made my skin hum. Then, quietly, tell me one thing you've wanted to ask for today but didn't. My lips parted, ready to deflect, to make a joke, anything safe, but nothing came out. Because there was something. Not small, not silly. I wanted to stay in this moment, to hold on to this quiet closeness we'd somehow fallen into. My voice cracked. I didn't want today to end. It was true. Not the whole truth, but real enough. When I looked up, he was watching me, really watching me, with a softness that was almost reverent. I didn't either, he said, his voice quiet. And then, without fanfare, his hand drifted toward mine, brushing gently over my knuckles, a barely there touch that made my breath catch. I didn't move, didn't speak. I let it stay. He nodded at the deck again. Your turn. My fingers trembled slightly as I passed the cards. We drew. This time I won. He smiled, calm, patient, his eyes shining with something I couldn't name. Your wish, he said, the word hanging like a secret between us. The word he used, Andy, should have broken the spell. But instead, it felt like a line between us we both understood too well. A thread we had both chosen not to cut. I swallowed. Tell me why you really wanted to play this game. He didn't laugh. Didn't deflect. He leaned closer, the space between us now barely a breath. And in that low, unshaken voice, he said, because I wanted to be near you. My heart slammed against my ribs. Let me know when you're ready to continue. The space between us pulsed with tension, thrumming with every word we hadn't said. All the boundaries I'd kept in place, the careful rules, the silent reminders of who we were, began to slip, softened by the way he was looking at me now. And the way I couldn't stop looking back. The forest beyond the tent drifted into twilight, the horizon bruised purple, the stars blinking through like tiny confessions. But in here, in this pocket of quiet, time hung suspended, still and trembling. Neither of us dared move. Not yet. And then he reached for me again, slower this time, with intention. His fingers touched mine, not as a casual brush, not as an accident. And I didn't pretend not to feel it. Instead, I let my fingers bend toward his, our hands finding each other in a touch as light as breath, fragile, curious, full of unsaid things. But it was enough. Enough to shift something inside me that I didn't know was still waiting to be moved. Enough to know that the line between us had faded, not erased, but softened to the point that turning back would be a line neither of us could live with. Darkness pressed in outside, wrapping the woods in silence and scent, pine, soil, dusk. Inside, the air was stifling, the heat between us undeniable. When Evan gave me that crooked, boy meets man smile, I forgot how to inhale properly. He reached for the cards again, but this time it was more distraction than game. His hands fumbled a bit, like he needed the shuffle to steady himself. We each pulled a card. Mine, a 9. His, another ace. He stared at it for a beat longer than necessary, then lifted his eyes, something unreadable glinting there in the space between words. I guess I win, he murmured, voice a little rough around the edges. I nodded, barely. He held my gaze for a long moment, then leaned slightly forward, as if to catch the words before they could dissolve into the air. My wish, he said quietly, is for a kiss. The words didn't fall. They landed, solid, impossible, bright as lightning in the dark. I could have shut it down. I should have. But when I looked at him, really looked, and saw the softness in his eyes, the hope, the restraint, I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I gave a single nod, small but sure, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. He moved in slowly, carefully, his eyes searching mine for a sign to stop. I didn't give him one. We were so close now I could see the pale scar above his brow, the one from that summer he learned to ride his bike. I saw the freckles dotting his cheeks, the ones the sun had scattered there like secrets. Then his lips touched mine. Just barely. But enough. The kiss was soft. Hesitant. A question, not a statement. It held no claim, only wonder, a kind of reverence I hadn't felt in years. And I answered it. I kissed him back. It was instinct more than decision, the quiet release of something long held. He exhaled sharply, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. And then, Lily, check near the tent. I think they're there. My sister's voice floated through the trees, light and laughing. Shock sipped through me like cold water. Evan jerked back, eyes wide, both of us breathing hard as the sound of footsteps grew louder. We had seconds. Maybe less. I scrambled, heart pounding, scanning the tent like a trapped animal. Say I'm sick, I whispered, clutching at the first excuse I could find. His brow furrowed. Wait, what? I got sick, too much sun. You're helping. I shoved a half-full water bottle into his hands and lay back, faking a weak groan just as the tent flap rustled. My sister's face appeared, framed in fading light. Hey, we couldn't find, she stopped. Her expression shifted to concern in an instant. Claire? She felt faint. Evan jumped in, his voice rushed but convincing. I think the sun got to her. I nodded weakly. Just dizzy. Needed to lie down. My sister's mouth formed a sympathetic. Oh, poor thing. I'll get the first aid kit. Be right back. She disappeared, rustling through supplies. Evan and I locked eyes. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then he smiled, small, secret, meant only for me, and gave my hand a quick squeeze before letting go, just as the world came back into the tent. Outside, the night carried on like always. But in here, nothing was the same.